Welcome to Bedtime Horror, your portal to scary stories.
It was late one evening, and I was on my way home when my eyes caught sight of a supermarket, and I decided to swing by. I parked my car in the almost empty parking lot and walked towards the entrance. It was a bit chilly, so I hurried inside and got a shopping cart. As I pushed my cart through the supermarket, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The supermarket did look like it had seen better days. The air was thick with the smell of bleach and stale food, and the silence was broken only by the occasional beep of a scanner and the muffled conversations of other shoppers. I was there to pick up a few things for dinner, but I was starting to feel like I was trapped in a labyrinth. The aisles seemed to stretch on forever, and I couldn't find the things I was looking for. I wandered aimlessly, feeling more and more anxious with each passing minute. Suddenly, I heard a strange noise coming from an aisle ahead of me. It sounded like someone was dragging something heavy across the floor. I froze, and I could feel that my heart was pounding in my chest. I didn't want to go any closer, but I was afraid of what I might find if I didn't. With a deep breath, I gathered my courage and walked towards the sound. As I got closer, I could see that it was coming from the produce aisle. I carefully walked forward and looked around the corner, and my blood ran cold. There, in the middle of the aisle, was a man. He was tall and thin, with a pale, gaunt face and sunken eyes. He was dressed in a dirty, ragged coat, and he was dragging a long bloody trail behind him. It all looked like a scene straight out of a horror movie. I watched in horror as he reached into a crate of apples and pulled out a fresh one. He took a bite, then spat it out onto the floor. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and I saw that his lips were stained with blood. I wanted to run, but it was like I was frozen to the spot. I watched as the man picked up a banana and peeled it slowly. He ate it in long, exaggerated bites, and I could see that he was savoring the taste of the fruit. When he was finished, he tossed the peel to the ground and started to walk away. I watched him go, and my mind was racing with questions. Who was this man? What had happened to him? And why was he eating the fruits in the supermarket like a savage? I stood there for a few minutes, trying to calm down. I told myself that I had just imagined the whole thing. It was just a trick of the light, or a hallucination brought on by hunger and exhaustion. But deep down, I knew that I wasn't imagining anything. I had seen the man with my own eyes. I decided that I had had enough. I grabbed my cart and headed for the exit, not bothering to finish my shopping. I just wanted to get out of that supermarket as quickly as possible. As I walked through the parking lot, I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see the man lurking in the shadows. But there was no sign of him. I got into my car and locked the doors, then drove away as fast as I could. I never went back to that supermarket again, and I still have nightmares about the man with the bloody trail. It was my usual Saturday grocery shopping day. I was in a hurry, as usual, trying to grab all the items I needed and escape the crowded supermarket as quickly as possible. While I was maneuvering my cart through the aisles, a commotion erupted in the fresh produce section. A man, tall and muscular with a menacing glare, was shouting at a cashier over a pricing issue. He was clearly agitated, his voice was rising with each word, and his hands was gesturing wildly. The cashier, the young woman with a look of fear on her face, tried to apologize and explain the situation, but the man did not listen. I watched in horror as the man grabbed a carton of eggs from the shelf and threw it at the cashier, narrowly missing her head. The eggs shattered on the floor, sending shards of shell and yolk was flying everywhere. The woman let out a startled scream and scrambled backward, and her eyes was wide with fear. The man's eyes radiated pure anger, and his face contorted into a mask of fury. He charged towards the cashier, with his fists clenched, and his breath came in ragged gasps. I froze, and I could feel that my heart was pounding in my chest. I wanted to run, to escape the violence that was unfolding before my eyes, but I was like frozen to the spot, paralyzed by fear. The man reached the cashier and grabbed her by the arm. His grip was so tight that she cried out in pain. He pulled her towards him, and he had his face inches from hers, and screamed, "You're going to pay for this." The other shoppers had gathered around, watching in horror as the man threatened the cashier. I could hear murmurs of fear and disbelief mingling with the sounds of glass breaking and people screaming. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just stand there and watch the man hurt the cashier. I had to find a way to stop him. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. My voice was shaking as I said, "Sir, please stop. There's no need for violence." The man turned to me. His eyes was blazing with anger. He released his grip on the cashier and pointed at me. His voice was dripping with venom. "You don't know what you're getting into, lady. This is none of your business." "I know it's not my business," I replied. I tried to have my voice calm, but I can't just stand here and watch you hurt someone. This is not the place for violence. The man lunged towards me, but before he could reach me, a security guard intervened. The guard was tall and imposing, but had a calm demeanor and exuded confidence. He stepped between me and the man, and his voice was calm but authoritative. "Sir, you need to calm down and leave the store immediately," the guard said. "This is not the way to resolve any conflict." The man glared at the guard, and his eyes was filled with hatred. But he knew he was outnumbered and outmatched. As he walked away, he glared at me one last time. His voice was low and threatening. "You'll regret this," he said. I watched him go. My heart was still pounding in my chest, and my body trembling. I was relieved that the violence had stopped, but I was also shaken by the experience. I had never seen anything like that before. I turned to the cashier, who was now being comforted by a store employee. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "Thank you for helping me." I smiled weakly and said, "You're welcome. I'm just glad I could help." I left the supermarket that day with a heavy heart. I had witnessed something that would stay with me for a long time to come. I had seen the dark side of human nature, the capacity for violence and cruelty that exists within us all. But I had also seen something else that day, the courage of a woman who stood up to a bully, the strength of a security guard who protected the innocent, and the resilience of a community that came together in the face of fear. It was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is still hope. There are still people who are willing to stand up for what is right, even when it is difficult. And that gives me hope for the future.
Thanks for watching, and I hope this story was to your liking.